blocking is not an optional step when it comes to finishing your garments. In this video, we're going to be talking about what is blocking and why it's important. We're also going to talk about the ways that you have to block depending on the fiber that your project is made of. And lastly, I'm going to actually walk through step by step how to wet block and how to steam block 2 of my projects. Hello everyone, my name is Hunter May. I am the owner of May Crochets and I am a pattern designer, also a maker. I block my finished garments and you definitely should be too. You've probably seen blocking around on social media. A lot of people like to show before and after clips of differences between the unblocked versus blocked, and you probably don't really know what this is, what this means, especially beginners. I didn't really know what blocking was until social media. I did not do it at all. So we're going to be mainly talking about garments. Blocking can definitely help with other things, not garments, accessories, home things, like this blanket over here. I don't know if you can see it. I actually blocked it because the sides were curling in a little bit, so it helps with reshaping things like that. But it's really important for garments because one, we want what we wear to look good. I didn't make this, but you know. It can also help in making sure the finished shape of our project is actually what it should be. So first and foremost, what is blocking? Basically, blocking is a way to stretch, relax the fabric to make it more uniform, make all the stitches more uniform. We're humans, so we're not absolutely perfect. So while you're making the project, you're not like 100% uniform with your tension and your stitches all throughout. So blocking can help relax the fibers. And then this makes the fabric look way more consistent throughout and uniform. It can also help, like I mentioned with the blanket, to have the seams and the edges lay more flat or more relaxed versus being more pronounced. And like I mentioned before, also, it can help you meet the measurements that you're supposed to actually meet. So if you just crocheted something, it might be a little tight, but once you wet block it and relax it, it's going to stretch out a bit, so it's going to meet the measurements. That's why it's really important to block your gauge before measuring it. And then lastly, blocking can also help with the drape of the fabric, especially with acrylic yarn. You're probably assuming that if you use acrylic yarn, you don't need to block, but that is definitely not true. Blocking can actually make your acrylic yarn softer and make the drape, which is the how the fabric flows, way better, and I highly recommend it. So those are just the few reasons why we block our finished projects. Now, blocking isn't just as easy as pick one method and do it, or learn one single way of blocking and just do that every time. Sadly, it's more complicated than that because the fiber that you use matters in how you block it. There's tons of different fibers that your yarn can be made of, and you want to look at the label on the yarn to know what type of fiber it uses. So this little guy here, if I read the label, it says that it's 100% fine superwash merino wool. And there's going to be many different ways and places that you'll see the content, but it'll be somewhere on your label, and that's super important to know how you block it. So if you didn't know, if you use friction and heat on wool, you can actually felt it. So if you have a wool project, you don't want to be using steam or heat in any way because you could actually potentially felt your project. So knowing which fibers and how to block is super important. So the first thing you should know is there's kind of 2 main methods of blocking. So the first one, like I mentioned, is steam blocking, and then the other method is wet blocking. So I will be showing both of these blocking methods to you later in the video, but it's good to know which one to use for which fibers. So for wet blocking, it's almost always natural fibers. Like I mentioned, the wool can't be steam blocked, so definitely have to wet block that. And then also plant fibers, so linen, bamboo, cotton's a little bit different. We'll talk about that here in a second. Any plant fibers and any animal fibers almost always are going to be wet blocked. With steam blocking, the fibers that you have to steam block, is acrylic or like any synthetic fibers, so like polyester, things like that. And when I say you have to steam block, I mean you literally can't wet block acrylic. Like, it literally will not work. You have to use some form of heat on acrylic to even be able to block it at all. And I didn't know that as a beginner, and I was definitely wet blocking acrylic and thought I was doing the job, and I really wasn't. Nothing was happening. So don't make that same mistake that I did. Now let's talk about cotton. Cotton is actually a very special type of fiber in that you can actually do both. You can steam block and wet block it, and that's because cotton withstands heat pretty well. Obviously, you want to use the right setting of heat when blocking cotton, but you can do both. So in the examples that I'm going to give, I'm actually going to be using 2 different cotton garments. That way we can see how the cotton reacts. Now, you might have started looking at your yarn and realizing that some of your yarn has some blends. There are multiple different fibers that it uses. Companies, to make yarn a little bit cheaper, they usually will blend wool and acrylic together, and that can make it a little challenging when you are blocking, because which fiber are you supposed to use? Acrylic has to be blocked with heat, but you don't want to really use heat on wool. So that's where things can get really tricky. And the blocking method you choose with blends like that is just to choose the fiber with the most dramatic reaction wins. So if you have 75% wool and 25% acrylic, you're gonna wanna wet block it for the wool, because if you use steam on that amount of wool, it's gonna have more of a reaction versus the acrylic. If it was mostly acrylic and not a ton of wool, I would use steam blocking, but be very, very careful about it. And if you're really concerned about it, you can always make a little gauge swatch first, block that, and see what happens. It does take a little bit extra time, but way better than ruining your whole project. And if you just want a really quick cheat sheet here, if it's mostly animal fiber, you're gonna wanna wet block it. If it's mostly acrylic, you're gonna wanna steam block it, but very carefully. And then if it's mostly cotton or like a plant fiber, you're gonna wanna wet block it. Now that we've talked about the importance of the fiber when it comes to how you block it, let's go over the 2 different ways you can block, starting with steam blocking. So you can steam block on an ironing board, on the floor, depending on what's underneath of it, or blocking mats. That's what I use. So I have these little blocking mats I got on Amazon. You really can just use any padding type mat. This is gonna become more important on the wet blocking part, so I will talk about that during that time. But I'm just gonna use this as the surface for steam blocking, but no, I will talk about it more when we do the wet blocking. So first things first, you're gonna need some type of steamer, and my iron actually has a steamer option on it. So I just use my iron, so you don't need to have something super crazy. Also, mine has a little dial on it all the way back here. I don't know if I can show it super well, but it has like different fibers on here. And so since I'm doing cotton, I'm gonna make sure it's set to the cotton. I don't know how much that matters, to be honest, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. So I always set mine to the fiber that I'm using. That way I'm not using an insane amount of heat on it. We're gonna be blocking my butterfly top. This is gonna be so hard to show with this. My butterfly top with sleeves. I just made this, and the sleeves are bell sleeves, and they definitely do not have that great of drape to them. So I definitely want to block them to help that drape out. This is 100% cotton. It is Premier Home cotton yarn. So kind of similar to like the Lillian cream. Yeah, so we're gonna be blocking this. The middle probably doesn't matter too much, so I don't know if I'm gonna block the middle, but I definitely wanna block the sleeves, both of the sleeves. When it comes to blocking, this is wet blocking as well. I'll talk a little bit more about it there. There's so many different ways to do it, but our main goal is to apply steam to our project, right? So what I do is I lay it flat on my blocking board, and then I just start steaming it. But some people hang their projects up and then use a steamer, like you'd see someone steaming like a dress or something. So there's different ways you can do this. This is just how I do it. This is such a weird angle. Hey, so if you're trying to meet a specific measurement, like we talked about, of when you block, you're able to meet a specific measurement in your pattern, you could actually pin your project down with some pins before blocking with steam to kind of set it in place. But I don't really care about this one, so I'm not gonna be doing that. since my heat is set to cotton, I feel pretty comfortable just fully putting the iron on the project. Obviously don't set it on there, but since it's set to be okay with this fiber, I do this and nothing bad ever happens. So don't be scared to just fully put the iron on if you have settings to make sure that the fiber is what it should be. The really nice thing about steam blocking is that it's done basically right when you steam block it. When it comes to wet blocking, you'll see it can take a few days. That's why we're doing this one first. And that's why, like, if you have a cotton project that you want to wear right away and you don't want to wait a few days, steam blocking can be really nice, so you don't have to wait for it to dry. That's kind of really the only fiber that you have an option between doing a wet or steam block, because the other ones you don't really have a choice. But this one, that's kind of a pro for it. Okay, we are done steam blocking. That's literally all you have to do, and I will show off the drape here. It's truly so much better, and I'm excited to wear it again and see the drape is that much better. Now let's go into wet blocking. We're gonna be blocking my Tunisian crochet raglan t-shirt here that I have. It is cotton. And when it comes to wet blocking, there are so many different ways you can do it. The end goal is to get this wet, pin it to the size that we want it to be, and then wait for it to dry. That's generally what the goal is, right? But there's so many different ways to accomplish that goal. There's kind of like the lazy way to do it, and then it increasingly gets a little bit less lazy, but you're doing the same thing. When I first started blocking, I literally just had, oh, I have it over here. I literally just used a spray bottle full of water, and I would just spray the whole thing, both back, front, make sure everything's wet, pin it, wait for it to dry. That made it dry a lot faster because I only sprayed it with water, and it did the job. It got the job done. Now, the next up laziness version of that is, and this is usually what I do, if I'm gonna be honest with you, I will just take this and put it underneath the sink, just get it all wet, make sure everything's soaked through, and then try to like squeeze it out as much as possible. We don't want to wring it because that's bad for the fibers. We're just squeezing out everything as much as possible and then pinning it and everything, which we'll talk about. Then the last way, which is a little bit more bougie, I don't know, there's a more bougier part of it. So first, next up is people will get a bowl of water and soak their project into it to make sure everything's soaked up, and then put it in a towel and roll it up and kind of like step on the towel, make sure all the water is out, and then pin it. And then other people will also use that opportunity to wash their project. So they will put some soap, like wool wash if it's wool, in the bowl and use that as an opportunity to soak the project while it's in the process of being blocked, do the towel method, and then block it. So there's so many different ways to do it. Essentially, you want your project wet. Pick whichever method you want. I think I'm just going to put it under the sink and get it wet and just squeeze it out a little bit. Oh, before that, I forgot I should also talk about the blocking mats now. So, like I mentioned before, I use these blocking mats. When it comes to blocking mats, you really just want a foam mat that you're gonna be able to stick pins into to stretch and hold the fabric out or the garment. Classic blocking mats that you find on Amazon, like these ones, tend to be pretty expensive. So if you want the nice grid lines and things, then you probably want to buy the more expensive blocking mats. But there are other things that aren't labeled as fiber arts tools, which make it cheaper. So like the ABC rug puzzle tiles that you get for a kid's room. I think there's some things at Home Depot that are just like pads. So you can really get whatever, just anything that's like you can stick a pin in and it's not gonna absolutely destroy it. You want padding because moisture is gonna sit on this, and you don't want it to just mold underneath your project because that'd be really gross. So it needs to be something that can somewhat soak up the water. So that's why I just bought the blocking mats. I'll link these ones down below. They're on Amazon, so pretty easy to get. And the nice thing about this one too is, I'm trying to set this mat back with my toe. The nice thing about the ones I bought as well is they came with these pins here that are T-pins. I think they're called T-pins that I didn't need to buy and they just came with. So that's pretty nice too. So you're gonna need some type of pins to pin down your project. You can just lay it flat to dry, but most of the time we're wanting to reshape in some fashion of making it fit specific measurements that we want, or like this one's Tunisian crochet. So a little bit is curling, so I definitely want to make sure I pin those down. That way I can block them flat and they're not going to be curling when I actually wear it. Okay, now I'm going to actually go run this under the sink. So my project is all wet and I laid it flat. I made the blocking mats here the size that my project would fit on, which is the nice thing about these types of puzzle blocking mats is you can make them fit to what projects you're making. Like if I'm making a scarf, like a really long scarf, I can take these apart and put them all in a single row, and that's really helpful. You might want a measuring tape to measure out when you're pinning that the size of the project is the size that you expect it to be. So like I know what my general chest circumference of the pattern should be. So if I measure across and times that by 2, it should be what my finished measurement is. So you can kind of do some math that way and figuring out that it's the right size when you pin it. And if it's not, you might want to stretch it more and pin it that way. So with pinning, you're also going to need some pins. We just pin everything down and it helps with keeping everything flat so we don't get any curling, and we also get the size that we are expecting to. Now I'm going to pin everything down. Okay, we are all pinned down. Now, I don't have the best place to put this, so I literally just push it in the corner over here and just let it dry, and it'll be like a couple days until it's fully dry. And that is how you wet block and steam block your projects. So just a recap of everything we talked about why blocking is important and why we do it, the importance of knowing how to block depending on the fiber that you're using, and lastly, how to actually steam block and wet block our projects. I really hope you found this helpful, and you should definitely be blocking your projects as the last check right off your project to give it the finishing touch. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!
I wish I could leave my skin behind in this old rented room, float my way across the great divide and be buried